The building has been empty for 18 months. Nobody has touched it. That is not luck. That is a failure of recognition. The people who walked past it weren't lazy. They were looking for the wrong things. They checked the kitchen cabinets, they tried the doors, they left. What they missed wasn't hidden. It was installed. It was bolted to the wall, soldered into the ceiling, threaded through the floor, and it has been sitting there, degrading slowly, while the window for retrieval narrows by the week. The calculus of collapse is not about abundance, it is about lead time. The items that rebuild functional life after a disruption are not the ones that fit in a bag. They are the ones that take 18 months to manufacture and 6 months to ship. And right now they are still in that house. 6 of them. Here is what they are, why they matter, and exactly how to take them. After Hurricane Katrina, FEMA documented over 30,000 abandoned residential structures in the greater New Orleans area that sat unoccupied for more than 2 years. Salvage teams working disaster zones consistently report the same pattern. Soft goods, clothing, food, bedding disappear within weeks. Hard infrastructure components remain for years. The 2011 Fukushima exclusion zone, the post-conflict neighborhoods of Mosul, the post-flood parishes of coastal Louisiana, all of them followed the same curve. The perishable gets taken, the durable gets left. Understanding why that happens is the only way to not repeat the mistake. The pipes in that basement are worth more per pound than anything in the kitchen, and they have been standard residential infrastructure since the 1960s. Picture Marcus Held, a contractor working post-flood assessment in a mid-sized river town 3 weeks after a regional supply chain shut down. Hardware stores were already on allocation. PVC fittings were available, while copper was not. He was looking at a gutted duplex when you want to row. The previous occupants had taken everything soft. The copper supply lines to the water heater, the branch lines running to each bathroom, the compression fittings at every shut-off valve, untouched. He had a pipe cutter, 2 hours, and no competition. Copper became the residential plumbing standard because of its corrosion resistance, thermal tolerance, and workability with simple hand tools. It does not require adhesive. It does not off-gas. It joins with heat and solder or with push-fit connectors that require no flame at all. In a grid-down repair scenario, copper pipe and fittings are the difference between a functional water system and buckets. The London Metals Exchange copper price benchmark has historically spiked 40 to 60% within the first 90 days of any significant supply disruption. Not because demand increases, but because available stock evaporates. Identify supply lines by their dull orange color and the slight weight differential from plastic. Use a pipe cutter, not a saw. A saw leaves burrs that compromise fittings. Remove fittings intact. Coil flexible lines carefully to avoid kinking. Catalog diameter before you leave. 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch are not interchangeable, and mixing them in the field costs you a trip back. The pipe is there. The fittings are there. Most people walk past both. The wire inside those walls has a gauge stamped on its jacket, and that gauge determines everything you can build. Terrence Wolfe spent 4 days inside an abandoned ranch house in the high desert of eastern Oregon during a regional grid assessment exercise, mapping what had been left behind. The previous owners had stripped the appliances. They had taken the panel cover. They had left every inch of Romex in the walls and ceiling, including a 40-foot run of 10-gauge wire that fed the former electric range, wire rated for 30 amps and capable of handling a substantial DC load from a battery bank or solar array. Residential electrical wire is manufactured to specific gauge standards that are not interchangeable. 12-gauge handles 20-amp circuits. 10-gauge handles 30. 14-gauge is standard for lighting and outlets. In a post-disruption environment, wire becomes unavailable not because copper disappears, copper is abundant, but because the manufacturing and insulation process requires industrial infrastructure that goes offline in the same event that creates the demand. After the 2003 Northeast blackout, Electrical supply wholesalers in affected areas reported complete depletion of 14-gauge and 12-gauge Romex within 11 days. The wire in an abandoned structure is pre-cut, pre-run, and already protected by insulation that took a factory to produce. Remove it carefully. A utility knife scored along the drywall joint, a steady pull, no jerking. Check insulation integrity before you coil it. Mark gauge with tape at each end immediately. Loose wire without gauge marking is nearly useless in the field. The wire that heated someone's breakfast is now the wire that charges your batteries. In the garage of a house the Petrov-Aldane family left behind when they relocated after a plant closure, the hand tools were still on the pegboard. Every power tool was gone. The table saw, the cordless drill set, the air compressor guitar, stripped. The hand plane, the draw file, the set of bench chisels, the brace and bit, still hanging. This pattern repeats across every documented salvage scenario. Power tools have obvious monetary value and immediate resale. Hand tools do not, and most people today lack the vocabulary to recognize what they're looking at. A number 4 bench plane, properly tuned, can flatten and dimension lumber to tolerances a power planer matches but cannot exceed. A good draw file shapes metal. A brace and bit bores holes in wood without any power source at all. These tools were manufactured to standards that peaked in the mid-20th century and have not been matched at the mass market level since. Stanley tools made before 1960 are routinely sought by craftspeople who have tested them against current production equivalents and found them superior. Take the hand tools. Leave nothing with a blade or a cutting edge behind. Check for rust. Surface, rust is irrelevant. Deep pitting is not. Wrap blades in oiled cloth immediately. A hand plane that sat in a damp garage for 3 years needs 30 minutes of work. It will then last another 70 years. The power tools they took will need a grid that no longer exists. By the first hard freeze, the plastic sheeting over the Rinaldi house's broken window had failed at 2 of its 4 taped corners. That is a thermal breach 6 inches wide in a wall that was otherwise intact. Glass is not a primitive material. It is a precision industrial product. Float glass, the standard for residential windows since the 1950s, is produced by floating molten glass on a bed of molten tin to achieve uniform thickness and optical clarity. It cannot be fabricated without an industrial float line. There is no field substitute. Polycarbonate sheet exists, but it yellows, degrades under UV, and provides substantially less insulation value than even single-pane glass. In a prolonged disruption, intact glass panes are among the first structural materials to become completely unavailable at any price. Remove intact panes only with proper suction cups or 2-person handling. Glass failure during removal is a medical event. Take the window hardware too. The sash locks, the weather stripping channels, the sill angle stops. A broken window in winter is not a comfort problem. It is a core temperature problem. Glass holds heat. Plastic stalls the loss for days. Know the difference before the temperature does? The cast iron skillet on the back shelf of that kitchen has not been touched because it is heavy, because it is black, because it looks like work. That is exactly why it is still there. Lorraine Vasquez Oñede salvaged a 12-inch lodge-style cast iron skillet from an abandoned farmhouse and documented the find in a regional preparedness forum. The pan had surface rust. It had been sitting in a humid kitchen for 2 years. She re-seasoned it in 40 minutes using lard and a fire. It has been in daily use since. Cast iron cookware requires no non-stick coating, no special detergent, no replacement parts. It works over open flame, in a wood-burning oven, over coals, on a propane burner, or buried in embers. It distributes heat evenly and retains it after the flame is removed, a property that conserves fuel. The Griswold and Wagner foundries, which produced the benchmark cast iron of the early 20th century, are long closed. New cast iron is available but inconsistent. The old pieces, identifiable by their lighter weight and smoother interior finish, are in those houses, on those shelves, heavy and overlooked. Take every piece of cast iron in the building. Take the Dutch ovens. Take the flat griddles. Check for hairline cracks by tapping with a metal rod. A clear ring means intact, a dull thud means cracked. Leave the cracked pieces. Take everything else. A cracked pan is a liability. A sound one is a lifetime of meals over any fuel that burns. Stop for a moment. 5 of the 6 items on this list require no manufacturing knowledge to use, but months of industrial lead time to replace. That is not a coincidence. The modern supply chain is extraordinarily efficient at making things feel permanent, right up until they are not. The speed of disappearance in a disruption is directly inverse to how long the item takes to make. Food, fuel, medication, shucks gone in days. Copper fittings, float glass, cast iron, Lisoric still present 2 years later, because the people who passed through were not trained to see them. Here's the real question. Not what you would grab if you had 10 minutes in that building, but what you would fail to recognize as valuable if you had 10 days. That gap between time available and knowledge applied is where most recoveries fail. The last item on this list is the one that makes every other item on the list actually usable. It costs nothing to take. It weighs almost nothing. And it is still in almost every house that has ever been abandoned. The plastic sleeve taped to the side of the furnace in the utility room still has the original installation manual inside it. The kitchen drawer still has the city water district map folded into thirds behind the takeout menus. The home office still has the 3-ring binder with the property plat, the well depth, the septic field diagram, and the contractor receipts that document every structural modification made to the building since 1987. Paper documentation was systematically devalued over the last 20 years. Digitized, discarded, forgotten. That devaluation created a salvage category that is almost universally overlooked. In a grid-down scenario, digital information is inaccessible without power and devices. Paper is not. FEMA's post-Katrina after-action reports specifically cited the loss of local infrastructure documentation, waterline maps, electrical grid schematics, building plats, as a primary obstacle to recovery operations. Communities that retained paper copies of local infrastructure maps restored services measurably faster than those that did not. Take every technical manual. Take every mechanical diagram. Take property plats, well logs, soil surveys, medical references, and repair guides. And take the USGS topographic maps if they are there. A 3-ring binder full of HVAC manuals and county plat maps weighs less than 2 pounds. In month 6 of a prolonged disruption, that binder is the most valuable thing you took from any building, anywhere. Information does not rust. It does not crack. It does not require reseasoning. But once the building collapses, it is gone with everything else. Copper pipe is the supply chain bottleneck you can carry out in a duffel bag. Yes, electrical wire determines what you can build and power long after manufacturing goes dark. Hand tools improve with maintenance and outlast every grid-dependent alternative by decades. Glass is the only material that preserves your thermal envelope through a full winter without degrading. Cast iron is fuel agnostic, century durable, and sitting on a shelf in almost every house that has ever been occupied for more than 10 years. Paper documentation is the only resource in that building that can tell you how to use everything else. In month 3, the person who moved on these items is repairing pipe runs, wiring battery banks, processing lumber by hand, sealing windows against a hard freeze, cooking over open flame without fuel anxiety, and reading the original wiring schematic for a building they are trying to restore. The person who did not is improvising with degraded substitutes and losing time that does not come back. Learn to identify copper by color and weight before you need it. Carry a pipe cutter and a wire stripper on any site assessment. Photograph every room before you touch anything. Layout, labels, gauges, markings. Know your local salvage laws and property access regulations cold before you enter any structure. Move before the roof does. The house is not waiting for you to be ready. It is already in the process of becoming something you cannot enter.